and welcome to Off-Grid Journey. I am your host, Drew Lamb, and on today's episode, we're going to cover how to convert manure and food scraps into high-protein fish and chicken feed, cultivating your own tobacco, and the best, most affordable firearms for defending the homestead. Phones are open, and feel free to call in anytime. The number is 1-718-717-8296, and today I am joined by my very good friend, Adam Russell, and Adam's going to ride shotgun with me today. And he has done a fair amount of work with me over at the farm. He's helped me wrangle up bass and make some deliveries, and he's helped me to learn how to roll tobacco, roll cigars and cigarillos from tobacco that I've grown in my greenhouse here at home. And we've spent a fair amount of time out on the range together too, busting caps. So he's pretty much into everything we're going to be talking about today. So first, let's get into black soldier fly farming. This is one of my favorite topics. Some of you guys might think this is kind of gross, and I've talked about this before when I've spoken about aquaculture. But this is such a useful tool, you know, especially if you're going to go off grid and you want to be independent. And you're going to be raising livestock. Your biggest challenge is going to be feeding your livestock, and especially if you're getting into aquaponics or raising chickens, and you're going to need to come up with a way to feed these guys. So I wanted to spend some time today talking about some of the things that I've learned with cultivating black soldier flies. And now some of you might wonder what the heck I'm talking about. I'm not talking about these little domestic house flies that you see, the pesky ones that wreck your picnic. I'm talking about these guys. They look like black wasps, and they're kind of scary looking. I used to think that they were wasps, but they're not. They're this docile little fly, and they look scary, but they don't bite. They don't have functioning mouth parts, and the winged adults don't live very long. They live for, you know, like a maximum of 8 or 10 days, and they just take water and they mate. And you will find them around compost piles usually, and if you're involved in any kind of composting, sometimes you'll find these big grubs in your compost or even in your garden beds. I used to find them in my raised beds in my greenhouse, and I thought I had some kind of a pest problem, and I went over to Ladybug Indoor Gardens and picked up some nematodes and put it in there. I thought I had something in there that might eat the roots of my plants, but actually they were just black soldier fly pupa. They were pupating in the soil, and they're dormant, and they don't do any harm. And you'll find them in your compost piles too. Now, these guys have quite an incredible lifespan. The eggs of the black soldier fly larva are usually laid near compost or in compost, and then after a few days or so, or up to a few weeks, depending upon the weather, they hatch out, and then they're very tiny. You could barely see them with the naked eye, and they start devouring compost, any kind of rotted material. They'll eat meat, you know, any kind of dead fish, any animal tissue, roadkill, carrion, any of that stuff. They'll eat that, and they grow pretty quickly. They double in size almost daily, and so sometimes these guys will get going in your compost pile by themselves, but they're not very useful if you're just turning them loose, or if they're just naturally in your compost. You're going to have a hard time harvesting the pupa and to use them for animal feed. And the reason why these make such a wonderful animal feed is because they're high in protein. They're roughly, the numbers vary. It depends upon what you're feeding them and their size and whatnot. But they're roughly 67% protein, and the rest is lipid material. And so that's a really good protein for fish and for chicken. Chickens absolutely love these things. And so if you're collecting them to feed your chickens, you're gonna have some really healthy chickens. They're gonna grow fast and be productive layers. And so what we're gonna get into is how to cultivate these guys. And so there's several different ways to go about it, and there's different things that you could feed them as well. They're actually very effective at processing manure, and so if you're raising livestock, you're going to have a fair amount of manure. And the problem with having manure around your farm, your homestead, is that it attracts flies and it smells bad. And with the black soldier flies, as long as they're not being overfed, there's no odor, and they also drive away domestic houseflies. And they don't like to be around human habitat, so they aren't going to invade your home. And so if you have like cow manure, hog manure, chicken manure, you could feed that to them, and they will process that, and the larva will process that, and you don't have issues with vectors passing through the digestive system of the larva. So that's incredible, because you could be worried about having like an E. coli contamination or something like that. And so these vectors have problems surviving the digestive system of the black soldier fly larva, which is another amazing benefit of these little bugs. Just on a side note, I've been doing an experiment this week, and I built this huge filtration system for my aquaponics system, because I have so many fish in my system now. They're getting very big. I probably have about 1,500 fish in my system, and they're between 6 and 9 inches, mostly catfish. And the solid waste they're producing is overwhelming the gravel beds that would normally filter this out. And so I had to build another filtration system. And the benefit of this is that I'm able to collect all of this fish poop, and I put it in buckets, and I use it to fertilize my garden beds around my property. But I've been experimenting with feeding the fish waste to the black soldier fly larva, and they actually eat it. They've been processing the fish waste, and so it's a good way to close that circle. Where we're taking that waste from the fish and processing it and converting it into protein and lipid, and then we're able to have a good protein source for the fish. I've also heard of the black soldier fly larva and pupa being used for hog feed too. I haven't done any experiments with that. So I was talking about the stages of the black soldier fly larva. It goes through several stages or instars, and they start out very small. They double in size. They keep growing and growing, and then they get to a point where they go from their normal white cream color to a slightly darker color, and then they'll want to crawl out of the compost and seek a nice dry, dark place to pupate. So then they'll crawl out, and then they'll go into a state where their outer shell, their puparium, hardens up. It gets very dark, and then they just lay dormant until they develop into a fly and hatch, which can take up to a few weeks or months depending upon the temperature. And so the challenge for me has been deciding, what's the best point in their development to use these guys for feed. I found that with my bluegill, they didn't like to eat the pupa. I think that the pupariums were too thick, and they didn't recognize it as being food. And so I started feeding them the larva, and they absolutely love it. they just devour the larva. It's their favorite food, actually, that and worms. Then I tried feeding them the pre-pupa, and they will eat the pre-pupa as well. And I've done some experiments where I've wanted to be able to generate feed that I could keep through the winter. So I've done some experiments with grinding up the pupa and then mixing in other adjuncts to make like a fish kibble, so to speak. So they've got something to feed the fish, something that I could store. And that's worked out really well too. Actually, all of the fish that I have, from the bluegill, the bass, to the catfish, they'll all eat that without any issues whatsoever. So that's primarily a product that is derived from the black soldier fly pupa. And I'll get around to the reason why it's more convenient to use the pupa in just a moment here. There's some other uses for the black soldier fly as well. It can be used for human food, and I've heard, I haven't eaten any myself actually, and I think I'll wait till things get really bad.
I might have ate one by accident while working in your farm.
I heard they're kind of nutty.
Yeah.
But I think I would roast them first. That would probably be the way to go.
You have a smoker.
Yeah, could put them on the smoker with some mesquite. That might be tasty.
You could try black soldier fly loaf if you want. A little
BSFL risotto or something like that. That would be good. And so, you'd probably be pretty healthy if you're eating a diet of black soldier fly larvae. That's a lot of protein in there.
Yeah, if I had to, I'm sure I've ate worse things in my life.
Yeah, and they can also be used to generate biofuel. I've seen some YouTubes of this. I was trying to find a clip, but I didn't have enough time to find the one I was looking for. But you could take them and freeze dry them to remove the moisture, and then run them through an expeller. And it's a really arduous process. Just a lot of cranking away, and it just squishes them and squeezes out the oil. And
we'll have to try and see if your wife can make something delicious out of soldier fly.
I'm sure she could. Everything that Kelly makes is awesome. I bet she could figure it out.
I don't think she'll be happy about it, but I'm sure it'll be fine.
But with this biofuel, if you cultivate enough of these guys, and you might want to supplement it with some cooking oil too, to get a good volume of it. But then you add in your lye and your methanol, and you could basically be creating energy from waste, from rubbish. And also, the shells of the hatched pupa are made out of a material called chitin, and chitin is it's a natural material that's kind of like plastic, I guess. It's very much like fingernails, duck bills, shrimp shells, crab shells. They're all made from chitin. And chitin has a lot of applications. If you're raising enough of these guys and you could produce chitin by the ton, there is a market for it, and it's used. There's biomedical applications. They make sutures with it, nutritional supplements. Actually, chitin is used to filter radiation from water. And I mix it into my worm compost bins. And because my theory is that if there's any radioactive contamination or heavy metals in there from organic plant material that I'm processing, that maybe it'll help to mitigate that. So I mixed that in there, and I've also discovered that they disappear. And I was trying to figure out why, what's happening, and how are they breaking down? How is this material breaking down? And the worm castings have an enzyme inside of them that breaks down chitin, and this actually helps to keep insects out of your worm bin. And also, I'm getting off the topic here, but it's also a good reason to use worm castings in your garden, or to make teas and foliars with the worm castings, because of that enzyme will keep insects away from your garden and away from your bins because of that component that's in there that breaks down chitin. The insects want to avoid it. So I guess what we should do now is get into how you can get these guys going. And they're natural in almost every single continent in the world, except when you get into the cold areas. I was looking at a map. Let's see if I've got a link here for you guys. I could drop this into the chat. If we get into... there it is. Okay, I'm going to drop this map in here. It'll show you guys where either people like me are cultivating the black soldier flies or they've been seen out in the wild. If you look at the map, you'll see that there aren't any in Canada. It seems to be too cold up there. So, but in most areas you'll find them. Where I live, I actually have wild black soldier flies in my neighborhood, and so there's a few ways that you can go about, attracting them. First, if you just get some compost going, and they're going to lay eggs around the compost. But what you're going to want is some sort of a bin, and I recommend a couple different methods. There's a tote bin, or you could build a bucket bin if you don't have a lot of money. And what I'll get into right now is the tote bin. The tote bin is my favorite. And what I did, I have a bunch of these. I just picked up some plastic totes over at Home Depot, and you need some plastic totes, or at least one, some 3/4 inch PVC, a uni seal, which is a rubber seal you can get from bulkreefsupply.com. So you need a 3/4 inch uni seal, 3/4 inch valve, and you need a drill, a couple drill bits, and either a hacksaw or some kind of chop saw to construct your drain system. And you can get going with these. If you go over to diptera.com, they've got some ebook downloads over there for constructing a black soldier fly nursery, and you could learn a lot about how to construct your bin there. Or you can check out blacksoldierflyfarming.com, and there's a lot of bin ideas on there. Avoid any materials that are made out of clear plastic. They're going to be brittle, and the sun is going to deteriorate them, and well, you're going to have a bad time with those. So what you need to do to construct your bin is first build the drain system. So you're going to take that a little piece of 3/4 inch PVC and cut it so it runs roughly along the length of the composter and extends out enough that you could fit your 3/4 inch ball valve on the end of it. And so you're going to cut some slits into it. And that's going to be your drain system so that it doesn't get too wet and moist and drown your black soldier fly larvae. And also it'll help prevent anaerobic bacteria from taking over and causing smells in your bin. And so then you'll want to drill a hole for your uni seal in the side of the bin, just slightly up from the bottom of the bin. Insert that in place, and then you're going to slide the PVC pipe through that and attach your ball valve to the outside of that bin. And so that's your drain system. And then you're going to want to drill some holes a few inches, I'd say about 3 inches from the bottom of the bin, so maybe like 1/16 of an inch holes. That'll help to ventilate carbon dioxide, but it's also going to set the maximum limit that you could have your compost in there. You really don't want the compost to accumulate and get very deep in there. And then a couple inches from the top of the bin, you're going to drill some holes that are roughly, I'd say at least 1/4 inch in size. It's not a problem if you go bigger. If you go I wouldn't go 1/2 inch, but if you go 3/8, that'll be okay. And run around the top of the bin, and then just below the lid, and then scuff up the inside with some sandpaper. And then you want to get another shallow bin that this whole thing will sit down into. And I'm going to tell you why. So what's going to happen is as the larvae start developing and they get into their prepupa stage, they're going to crawl out of the compost and through the holes that you drilled around the top, and they're going to fall into the outer bin. And then you could collect them, and you could use them for chicken feed, or you could feed them to your fish. And you're going to want to save some of them, like maybe 10% of them, and you're going to want to put them in another plastic bin filled with something like sawdust or wood shavings or something like that, and put some mesh screen over the top of it to something durable to keep rats from getting into it and eating your grubs. But don't get anything that's too fine. You want some kind of a coarse mesh so that the flies can get out when they hatch. And so now you've got this thing set up. Now you just need some larvae. So you can set this thing outside, and if you've got black soldier flies in your neighborhood, they're going to come around, and they're probably going to lay some eggs up underneath the lid. You could also take some corrugated cardboard, cut into strips, and tape it to the inside of the bin, and they will lay their eggs in the corrugations. You can also use plastic corrugated material like they use for real estate signs. That'll work too. Cut it into strips, and then they'll lay their eggs in there. They'll smell the compost, lay their eggs near the compost, and then the larvae will hatch and they'll crawl down into the compost. And that's a great way to get it going. Some people don't have success with this for whatever reason. The black soldier flies are often attracted to areas where there have been black soldier flies already or black soldier fly larvae. So sometimes you just can't get them going in there. So you need to get some larvae. There aren't a lot of sources. However, I have just happened to have developed a product that you could use to inoculate your compost bin. So for $30 plus shipping, you could get an inoculator from me for getting your bin started with about 1,000 black soldier fly larvae. You're probably going to end up with more like 2,000. I'm not going to count them out, but you're going to get a lot. And so if you want to get started with one of those, you can call Ladybug Indoor Gardens in Phoenix, Oregon at 541-618-4459 and place your order with them, and I will get the package ready and over to them, and they will ship it out. And this is a new product that we just introduced. We just sold some to a winery down in California, and they're going to be using the black soldier fly to process their grape pomace, and then they'll be using the pupa to feed their organic chickens on their farm. And I'm working on some systems. I have a meeting tomorrow with a brewery, and perhaps we'll be setting up some black soldier fly composting systems for them to process their waste streams and create chicken feed, because they raise a lot of organic chickens. So again, that's about $30 plus shipping for 1,000 black soldier fly larvae that you can use to inoculate your bin. And it'll come on this moist material with some food that they'll be able to eat. Is not during their trip, and when they arrive, you just take it out of the package and place it in your compost bin, and they're good to go. And so I've spent more time on this than I had hoped. I'm going to give you guys a few resources here if you want to learn more. You go to blacksoldierflyfarming.com, diptera.com, and you could also go to facebook.com/Black Soldier Fly Farming. These are all like really, I just said excellent resources. I've learned a lot from others on here. There's especially on the Black Soldier Fly Farming forum. I'm usually in there, and I try to help newbies as much as I can. But there's some guys in there that I think are even way better than I am at cultivating the black soldier fly. There's a guy named Solving who is a very prolific breeder, and he has a YouTube channel. It's worthwhile watching his videos. Just incredible. He's a really good innovator, and the forum's really supportive. Diptera has done some very in-depth research on the black soldier fly. And also, if you just go and you just search around, there's a lot of scientific articles, studies that you could find in there. And I've learned a lot in there. We didn't really touch on breeding your black soldier flies, to get more. If you guys are interested, I could get into this in more in depth on another show, or I'll put together some YouTube presentations on this. But this would get you started with what I'd call free range black soldier flies. and so, but if you really wanted to grow the colony, you'd want to get a nursery set up and an insulated, climate controlled environment like what I have. I have about a 250 square foot insectary where I raise these guys, and Nine Inch Nails music is playing all the time. No, I'm kidding. But
it's a little creepy in there. Once you get used to it,
it took a while for me to get used to it. At first, Radu Popa from Diptera brought down my starter colony of black soldier fly larvae, and it was really kind of ooky at first. And when they had hatched, and the insectary was filled with thousands of flies, big giant flies buzzing around, and it was a little creepy, a little disturbing at first, but you get comfortable after a while with them. They don't bite you, and
once you can put your arms up to the elbows in a pile of maggots, you're usually fine by then.
Yeah. It builds character. So, Adam, let's move on to our next topic here. The deer flies are different than the black soldier flies, Joe. I'm just looking in the chat here. Yeah, I don't like those deer flies. Those are brutal. Or horse flies is what we call them around here. Those are different. The black soldier flies don't bite. But let's get on to our next topic here. Cultivating your own tobacco. A couple of years ago, I ordered some seed from the Victory Seed Company in Oregon. I think they're up in Malala. And I ordered the Havana tobacco seed. And this is an heirloom seed that's genetically the same as the tobacco that's grown in Havana. So I thought, well, heck, if I'm going to cultivate something, I can necessarily just, go to the store and buy, right? So I got that, and so we get this little packet with a bunch of little tiny seeds, and I got them started. I mixed up some potting soil and put it in some little containers, and you surface sow the seed, and you don't bury the seed. You just sprinkle it on the top, and they're photoreactive. So just exposure to light, and of course they need some moisture, and then they start to sprout. And I got my first ones going, and it was still winter. It was February, I believe, when I got those first ones started. But I got them going indoors in my house, actually. And then when they started to get a little bit bigger, I moved them out into the greenhouse. And then when they hardened, I broke them up, and I started planting them in the garden beds, my raised garden beds in the greenhouse. And by about September, the plants were roughly 6 feet tall. And we had some leaves that were fairly big. I think some were roughly 12 or 14 inches by about 6 to 8 inches wide.
The large ones were over a foot.
Yeah, and so they start to turn yellow when they're ready to harvest. And you pull the leaves off, and then you want it to dry them. And there's several different ways. I found, in researching how to cultivate and age and cure tobacco, there's really no one set way. It's all about personal preference, really. And I think a lot of it has to do with the climate you're in and the tobacco that you're growing and the flavors that you're going for. So I tried two methods for drying the tobacco, aging the tobacco. And so what the tobacco is going to go through some color changes. The leaves, of course, start out green. You harvest them when they start to yellow, and the simple method was just to cut the stalks and hang them upside down to dry. And I like that method because it was expedient. However, I didn't like the quality of the leaf. A lot of the leaves were touching each other, and I had more mold problems when that was happening, and it was hard to get the leaves off without damaging other leaves. And I don't think I'm going to use that method again. The other method I used was I just took some line or cord, and I tied them into that and hung them up kind of like flags around my covered patio and let them dry like that. And that worked really well. And then it was easy to remove the leaves, as we wanted to work with them. And I started at first, let's see, those first ones I'd aged for a few months, and we tried some out, and they were a bit green.
It was
still
November, I think, when we rolled our first cigars.
Yeah, and it kind of burned the tip of my tongue a little bit.
Yeah,
it was a little rough. I'm not a regular smoker.
They still burn the tip of your tongue. Those are now close to... How long have those been sitting, the ones we rolled our first batch?
I think
that are left.
I think it'll be 2 years this fall that we did those first ones. I've been doing some research into the aging of the tobacco, and some people go for a few weeks to a few months to a few years, and then some people will take it further into a fermentation process where they'll bundle them together and moisten them and then let them ferment. And this is all like highly secretive stuff. Some of these big companies that make the fine cigars, they don't really talk about their process very much. They just keep it a secret, and these are trade secrets. But the stuff we've got on the patio right now, we've been pushing 2 years that's been aging. And I've read 2 to 3 years for some tobaccos is just necessary. What's happening is there's a process where certain compounds are being broken down, and primarily carcinogenic compounds are being broken down. So you don't want to smoke green tobacco or chew green tobacco. It's not healthy. Plus, it tastes horrible.
We did try chewing green tobacco.
Well, I just want to see what it tasted like. So you go through the process. It's just like brewing beer. I wanted to see how the beer would change as it ferments.
It tastes bitter, and your tongue goes numb.
Yeah. That Havana tobacco is pretty potent, I think.
Yeah, neither of us have been able to get through a full cigar of what we rolled.
No. But let's get into rolling them. We found a YouTube channel. We found this guy who referred to himself as a plasterer, but I think he's a mobster.
He was witness protection.
Yeah, I think so. He didn't show his face. He kind of sounded like a wise guy.
Never saw his face. Saw his catalog.
Yeah, but he really had the badass techniques on how to select a leaf and roll a fine cigar. So you have to...
And the finer makings of paste.
Yes, of course. It's all about the paste. So you have to select your leaves first. And also, when you've been aging these leaves, it depends on your climate, but they can get dry and brittle. And I've noticed that changes with the weather. So if it's really moist outside, humidity's high, those leaves get pliable and leathery, and you can work with them. Otherwise, you can't work with them when they're dry and crunchy. It's absolutely impossible. And so I found like right now, we couldn't work with the leaf at all in the condition that it's in right now.
No, it would crumble.
Yeah, but in a few months, they'll be pliable again. I suppose you could mist them to soften them up, but again, you want to be careful because you don't want them to get moldy. If they get mold on them, they're just toast. You got to throw away any leaves. And don't put them in your compost because nicotine is an insecticide. And also, don't plant your tobacco around your tomatoes because there's a disease that'll spread your tomatoes. It'll ruin your tomatoes. It's called something like tobacco mosaic disease.
Tell me you thought of that before you actually did that.
Oh, I've never. I've never done that. So you have to, if you're going to make a cigar from your homegrown tobacco, you want to select a big leaf, your wrapper leaves. So you want to sort out your leaves. So you take your big, your perfect leaves. Those are your wrapper leaves, and then you're gonna want to devein them. So you've got to pull the big veins out because it's going to be very difficult to roll with a big vein in there, and it's going to affect the flavor too. And it's not going to look very good, but it's not going to stay rolled. We
have a couple that look like something out of porn.
Yeah, some of the early ones weren't very pretty. And then you've got your filler leaves, which can be some of your little scraps and your smaller leaves. And so you want to sort these out. And some people also process their tobacco for smoking in pipes. And so they'll chop it up real fine. And again, this all boils down to just personal preference, with how you like your tobacco, and then you've got to mix up the paste. The key to making a cigar or a cigarillo is to have the right paste, and this paste,
flavorless gelatin and water.
And there was a little bit of sugar in there too, I believe.
Yeah, you can flavor it to, if you want to change the flavor. You're like a brandy or
a rum or something like that. You could add to it for a little flavoring. So the paste is going to help the wrapper leaves stick. And so then it's just a matter of taking your wrapper leaves, laying them out, and putting in your filler leaf, and rolling it and applying a little bit of paste so that it sticks. And there you go.
I wish we had the link to his site, because there are different directions to leave as far as the veins and veins inside, veins outside. It's been a while.
If you roll it the wrong way, like if you've got the veins running across the bias, it's going to come unrolled. It's not going to stay rolled. And
don't go crazy tight with them like we did on our first batch, where you were.
Yeah, if you roll them too tight, you got to be able to draw air through them, and so you could control this a little bit with your filler leaf too. Some of our best ones where we made like smaller tubes of filler leaf, and that helped it pull. But if you roll it too tight, it's not going to pull air. It's not going to stay lit, and you're not going to enjoy your cigar at all.
If you're sucking on a big brown veiny thing and nothing's coming out, you look pretty ridiculous to your friends. So there's been a lot of jokes with certain of these cigars. Well, pretty much it was an experiment. It's the first time we've.
Yeah, you're not gonna look cool at all if you can't draw off your
especially
cigar.
Someone like Drew that doesn't typically smoke.
Yeah, I don't usually smoke stuff, but hey, if I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna smoke something worthwhile, like homegrown tobacco. I mean, the cool thing about learning how to do this is that you've got a product, you've got something that you could trade. In an SHTF situation, you've got something that you can barter with.
Tobacco's a huge commodity.
Now, I'm not saying that you should get out there and start, selling unlicensed tobacco and stuff. That's against the law. You could get in trouble. But all bets are off, in an SHTF environment. So you're going to want, things that are going to be high value. And if there's some prepper who's jonesing for a smoke and he's got a box of ammo that you need, he's going to trade for sure. So, but as it is, a lot of people, say to me, well, isn't it illegal to grow your own tobacco? And, well, first I tell them that they're thinking like a slave. And then I tell them, well, no, you can grow as much tobacco as you want. The laws are somewhat convoluted, and I'm not an attorney, but so figure this out on your own. But for my own research, it looks like you can grow as much of your own tobacco as you want.
As long as it's not for commercial use.
Right. Now, another thing, too, is that there's a difference between tobacco plants and tobacco products. So you could sell tobacco plants, and that's fine. It's not a tobacco product. And, like, I've been experimenting with a product. I've been growing tobacco in my aquaponics system using deep water culture. So I've got these floating rafts, and I seeded the tobacco seed over that, and I've sold some. I've actually sold quite a few to people that wanted to grow ornamental tobacco, Some people like to grow the tobacco because they think the flowers are pretty. 'Cause they do get these really pretty pink little flowers on them. But that's not a tobacco product. It's just a plant. But as soon as you start, doing some kind of processing, and you have leaves or product you've developed, then that's a whole different thing, and that's regulated. And so that's something that where if you're going to get in any kind of trouble, that's where you're going to run into it. But I've had some good results growing the tobacco in the aquaponics system. So I'm thinking next year that'll be a product that I'll offer for sale, because I could ship them overnight if somebody wanted to get some early starters for their garden. And also let me know if you're interested in my tobacco seed. I have a lot of seed. You can email me, Drew, at pyramidpurefoods.com. And since I've been raising these for a few generations now, so the seed's going to be adapted to the environment that I raised them in. But that they'll adapt to your environment too over time. That's why it's so important to save your seed. And I'm going to drop some more links into the chat here for you guys. Some of my favorite seed shops that have tobacco seed, if you don't want to get mine. There's Siskiyou Seeds down here in Southern Oregon. Those guys have bioregionally adapted seeds for this climate. They also specialize in a lot of native varieties of tobacco. This other link is for victoryseeds.com. I've purchased seeds from those guys many times, and these are all heirloom seeds, so they're not GMO, and they will produce seed. You'll be able to harvest seed and replant, which is really important if you're going off grid. You want heirloom, of course, so that you could save your seed. And as the plants adapt, your crops are gonna be better with each planting. It's that genetic information is going to be passed on. So even if your climate changes a bit, and you've got weather that's more dry, that information is going to be passed from the plant to the seed, and so your next crop will have it adapted to that change. Here's another cool link that I found last night on growing and curing tobacco at home. And so I'm going to drop that into the chat there. And there's also a group I found on Facebook. I can't remember the name of it, but if you just get in there and just type in tobacco, you'll see a group in there, and looks like there's some very experienced tobacco growers in there. There's some good information. I've learned a lot. Now, to get the best yields from your tobacco, I think if you go with soil culture and plant in a very sunny place, you'll get the best results. Like I've been doing it with aquaponics indoors. The plants aren't nearly as big as my plants get when I grow them in the greenhouse. So I think they're not getting access to the same amount of sun, and I also think that there could be an iron deficiency could be causing some of the issues with them. So, and I also noticed that they matured more quickly. I'm already getting leaves that are harvestable, but they're very small. So I think for getting them started, aquaponics or hydroponics is great, but for growing them, I think the soil culture works better and yields better results. I have a feeling it'll affect the flavor.
Have you transferred any of the ones that you have in the aquaponics to soil?
No, I haven't. No, they're just growing.
We should.
Out of the raft.
We're going to try that.
Yeah, might as well. We're getting kind of late in the season. We're getting to where the leaves are ready to harvest. Over the next month or so. September is usually ready.
Nice hot Southern Oregon summer, though. A quick month out there.
Yeah.
It might be surprising how quickly they take off.
Yeah. Well, let's get into the final segment of the show and talk about one of our other favorite topics.
Guns.
Guns and ammo. I wanted to get into the most reliable and inexpensive firearms for defending the homestead. And, this is,
So what's our budget today, Drew?
Well, the budget's low. We're not getting into all this macho stuff. Whenever I get into these online forums, or if I talk about guns on Double Cross Radio or whatever.
Tactical, ridiculous, 27 things hanging up, 94 rails.
Yeah. We're not going to get into that. We're going to be realistic. We're going to talk about some firearms that are effective, good battle rifles, good for hunting, are inexpensive, and you could get the ammo. And this is the thing, though, is when you talk about guns, especially with guys, every guy's a friggin' gun expert. Like every guy's like, I'm a genius. I know everything about firearms.
Mm-hmm.
Every guy you ever meet is like that. And so we're not going to get into all the tactical stuff. We're going to just strip down to basics, and I want to get into just things that I found through my own research. As I was building out my arsenal, and it's just like a toolbox. You've got different things for different purposes, but I've seen a lot of my friends who have become preppers, and a lot of them don't have a big budget, and sometimes getting a firearm was the very last thing that they did, and they procrastinated on it. And so I wanted to.
And prices aren't going down.
Yeah, and I wanted to. I went through my arsenal, and I was going, okay, well, what are the best rifles that I have, for home defense? If I was going to recommend something to a friend who didn't have a big budget,
I'll say the one that, well, both of us own, which almost everyone, it seems like, has anymore, for a cheap, reliable gun, has to be the SKS.
Sure. Yeah, I would agree, and that's a semi-automatic firearm that was the predecessor of the AK-47, and so that was a Russian design. The Russians actually ended up pitching the SKS, and
they used it very short amount of time before switching to the AK-47, but sent it out to a lot of different countries, made it after.
Yeah.
Lots and lots of countries. There's the Norenkos, the Yugoslavs, the Russian. That you can still buy a Serbian SKS, which is basically the same as the Yugoslavian. I've yet to see one that's bad.
I've got the Yugoslavian. I paid $300 for that, I believe, a couple of years ago. It's probably worth double that now.
Yeah, I have a Norenko, and I paid about the same, which is the Chinese.
Mm-hmm. So I think mine is a World War II era firearm. It's heavier than heck. It's probably of all my firearms, it's super heavy because it has a lot of stuff on it. It looks like a Swiss Army knife.
The Yugos have a grenade launcher and sight, and there's a lot more added on than, say, your typical Russian or your Norenko Chinese, which is basically a stripped down model.
So I've been thinking about taking the bayonet off of mine.
I took the bayonet off of mine.
It's super heavy. It doesn't seem to be very useful if I'm in close quarters. That's probably not a weapon I'm going to use.
I'd probably rather use the SKS as a bat than try to use it as a spear.
Yeah, and it's just super heavy. It's kind of awkward. I was thinking about removing it, and I've seen bipods that you could get and attach to the lug, but I've heard bad things about those too.
I have heard bad things too, and just with the way barrel harmonics can work, the more stuff you clip on, the less accuracy.
So the SKS is a semi-automatic, but also, if you can set it so that it's not semi-auto. If you turn, because on mine with the grenade launcher,
yeah, you can
turn off the gas port.
You can turn it to a single shot with it, which is supposed to increase accuracy.
Right.
The Norenkos and the others, if you don't have the grenade launcher launch attachment in the front, you'll not have the gas out shut off. So it was designed as just a straightforward semi-automatic rifle. don't do whatever you do. Convert a 10-round fixed magazine SKS to putting magazines in. The duckbill magazines, thinking it's an AK-47.
Right.
It will be a headache. It will never work right. The only magazines I found that worked for a short amount of time were by an American company called Tapco, which they make a lot of aftermarket components for Russian rifles, the SKS, the AK-47. I'm not a huge Tapco fan, in all honesty. They make decent trigger groups for the AK-47s. But as far as their aftermarket tactical products, their magazines work the best, a 20-round detachable with a duckbill, but they do not last for any time. They are not like a steel Bulgarian or Polish or actually any steel magazine for an AK-47 that lasts a long time. They, after around 500 rounds through each magazine, I've had failures. I tried them just to give it a shot because my first SKS I bought, someone had already converted and taken the 10-round magazine, fixed magazine out. Those are all now in the trash now, and I went online and found a 10-round fixed magazine and threw it back in. I see somebody said, yep, it's the only accessory that works. Yes, stripper clips are great.
Yeah.
Buy it cheap, 20 for $5 a pop.
And get a bandolier to carry them in.
There's some cheap bandoliers online you can find, Chinese surplus. I gave Drew one, except for the fact that it ties in the back like an apron, which is absolutely ridiculous. Easy to fix yourself.
Yeah, you could put a buckle on there. But that's the way to go. I mean, otherwise you're going to have all these loose stripper clips. You really need something to carry them in. Some other good rifles. We're approaching the end of the show here, but there's a few other good rifles that are inexpensive. We're wanting to talk about rifles that you can get for under $500. The Mauser is an excellent platform. I own a VZ24, so that's a Czechoslovakian Mauser based on the 1924 pattern, and that's a good long distance rifle that shoots an 8mm round, which can get expensive. I haven't had good luck with surplus ammo for that. Some of the surplus, I don't even think you can get it anymore, but there's a lot of 50 surplus that was out there with really hard primers. Actually, the firing pin on my Mauser was bent, and I think that was from those hard primers. I had to put a new firing pin in there.
And even I remember you checking to see if that's what it was, and it still wouldn't fire with the new firing pin on quite a few rounds with that old ammo.
that old 50 stuff I don't like, but you could get... you check out, there's some websites out there, ammoman.com sometimes has some good deals on ammo.
And make sure to check if your ammo is old surplus. It's probably corrosive, and you'll really want to keep up on cleaning your gun because it can.
If it's 50s, it's probably corrosive. Anything after 50s probably isn't.
Even the 70s, 80s, 7.62 is corrosive, and it's marked corrosive. A lot of the military surplus, and I have the gas tube rod on one of mine. I didn't pay attention, and it ate it up pretty good.
But I've purchased, I purchased an old Mosin that had been sitting in a garage and had some corrosion inside. It looked pretty bad, and I worked on it for a few hours with a stainless steel brush, and the rifling was really good, and it came out nice. It just took a little bit of work. So
Mosin's a great rifle for the price.
Yeah, but you've got the Mauser. You could pick those up for about $200, I think.
Right now, yeah, depending on which country. I've seen the Spanish ones go for pretty cheap.
And I saw a couple Turkish ones a friend of mine picked up that were really cool. The barrels were really long. I think they were 29-inch barrels. I really want to get one of those.
It's about the same size as a full size. What is it? The 71 or 3071 series, or whatever Mosin got.
Yeah, and again the Mosins. You can pick those up for between $150 and $200, depending upon condition. For a while, you were able to buy crates of them
Century Arms
really
still,
cheap for about $80 a piece. Just
Century
a
Arms
couple
still
years
has some
ago.
import ones in decent shape. A lot of people hate Century Arms. I hear lots of trash talk for them, but I really can't complain about they're a company that converts Russian rifles over here, mostly AKs, but they did import the Mosins for a while, and some people have a passionate hate for them, mostly gun snobs on gun snob forums.
Yeah.
But right. I have yet to have a problem with any gun that came from Century Arms.
Now, the question that I always get from people when we talk about rifles is, how bad does it kick? And I'm like, well, all rifles are gonna kick. It's just, but it's not like it's gonna punch you in the nose.
No. If it's Russian, it's probably gonna kick a little.
Yeah, extra. But the thing is, so what if it kicks? Like, okay, it doesn't really hurt if you pull it into to the pocket of your shoulder. Hold on to it.
And if you're really worried about it, go buy yourself a limb saver pad any place. If it's really an issue.
Just smack yourself into the wall a few times and go, oh, that's what it feels like, and that way you're not flinchy. But it's not like a punch in the face. Kicking is not a big deal. It just isn't something that you should even concern yourself with.
I see Mosin isn't a popular caliber, though. I like the Mosin. It's a 7.62 by 54R, which is actually a rimfire style cartridge. You can't reuse them. The good thing about them is they're not as cheap as they were. It's basically about comparable to a 30-06 around there, or is it a 3? Someplace in there of a Russian.
Yeah.
It's actually the oldest still used military round. They developed that round in the 1890s, I believe, and it's actually still used in service.
And we are coming up to the end of the show here, and there we go. So you've been listening to Documents, and I'll see you next time.